Within minutes, news of what happened spread throughout the entire courthouse. Court clerks whispered to each other in the hallways. Lawyers stopped their conversations to talk about the FBI director being mistreated. Even the judges heard about it before Marcus and Helen reached courtroom 4B. Judge Patricia Coleman was in her chambers when her secretary knocked on the door. "Your Honor, there's been an incident in the lobby. A very serious incident." Judge Coleman was a stern woman in her 60s who had been on the bench for 20 years. She prided herself on running a fair and respectful courthouse. "What kind of incident?" "3 of our security officers spent over an hour harassing FBI Director Marcus Williams. They didn't believe he was who he said he was." Judge Coleman felt her stomach drop. The FBI Director was one of the most important law enforcement officials in the country. If he had been mistreated in her courthouse, it would be a disaster for everyone involved. "Get me Janet Mitchell immediately," Judge Coleman said. Janet was the courthouse supervisor who managed all the security officers. Meanwhile, Marcus and Helen entered courtroom 4B. The trial was still going on, but Amanda Foster was clearly struggling. She was trying to explain technical FBI procedures to the jury, but she kept getting confused about the details. "Your Honor," Amanda said, "I need to call a brief recess to consult with my FBI technical expert." Judge Hayes looked up and saw Marcus entering the courtroom. He recognized Marcus from news photos and immediately understood what was happening. "Ms. Foster, is this your expert witness?" Judge Hayes asked. Amanda turned around and saw Marcus. Her face showed relief and embarrassment at the same time. "Yes, Your Honor. This is FBI Director Marcus Williams." A murmur went through the courtroom. Several people turned to look at Marcus with surprise and curiosity. Vincent Torino himself looked back from the defendant's table, his eyes narrowing as he realized who had just entered. "Director Williams," Judge Hayes said, "please approach the bench." Marcus walked forward while Helen took a seat in the gallery. Judge Hayes leaned forward to speak quietly. "Director Williams, I've heard about what happened in our lobby. I want to personally apologize for the treatment you received in my courthouse." "Thank you, Your Honor," Marcus said. "I appreciate that. We will be taking immediate action to address this situation," Judge Hayes said. "But first, I believe Miss Foster needs your assistance with this case." Marcus nodded and walked over to the prosecutor's table. Amanda looked embarrassed but grateful. "Director Williams, I'm sorry you weren't here earlier. The defense is challenging our wiretap evidence." Marcus quickly reviewed the documents Amanda showed him. Within minutes, he understood the problem and knew how to fix it. "Your Honor," Marcus said, standing up, "I can provide the technical testimony needed to authenticate this evidence." For the next hour, Marcus explained to the jury how FBI wiretaps worked. He described the technology, the legal procedures, and the chain of custody that proved the recordings were genuine. His testimony was clear, professional, and convincing. Richard Blake, the defense attorney, tried to challenge Marcus's expertise, but it was useless. Marcus had years of experience and knew more about FBI procedures than anyone in the courtroom. By the end of the day, the prosecution had presented a strong case against Vincent Torino. The jury looked convinced by the evidence. Marcus's testimony had helped save the case that his team had worked on for 2 years. But while the trial was proceeding, a very different scene was playing out in Judge Coleman's chambers. She had called an emergency meeting with Janet Mitchell, Officers Rodriguez, Murphy, and Garcia. "Gentlemen," Judge Coleman said, "I have never been so disappointed in courthouse staff in my 20 years as a judge." The 3 officers sat in chairs facing her desk. They looked miserable and ashamed. Janet Mitchell stood beside them, looking angry and embarrassed. "You harassed the FBI director," Judge Coleman continued. "You took his phone. You prevented him from doing his job. You made jokes about him. You treated him like a criminal, based on nothing but your own prejudices. Rodriguez tried to speak. Your Honor, we thought— You thought what? Judge Coleman interrupted. You thought a black man in a suit couldn't be a federal law enforcement officer? You thought he was lying when he showed you his credentials. Murphy looked down at his hands. We made a mistake. This wasn't a mistake, Judge Coleman said firmly. This was discrimination. This was abuse of power. This was everything our justice system is supposed to prevent. Garcia was crying quietly. We're sorry. We're really sorry. Being sorry isn't enough, Janet Mitchell said. Your actions could have destroyed the reputation of this courthouse. They could have damaged an important federal case. They could have violated Director Williams's civil rights. Judge Coleman leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. All three of you are suspended immediately. You will attend mandatory training on civil rights, bias, and proper procedures. You will write formal apologies to Director Williams. And if he decides to file a complaint, you will face whatever consequences he chooses. The three officers nodded miserably. They knew they were lucky to still have jobs at all. Got later that evening, Marcus met privately with the three officers in a conference room. Helen was there, along with Judge Coleman and Janet Mitchell. Gentlemen, Marcus said, what happened today was unacceptable. But I want to understand why it happened. Rodriguez spoke first. Sir, we see a lot of people in this courthouse. Most of them are defendants or witnesses. We made assumptions about you based on ... Based on what? Marcus asked. Based on how you looked, Rodriguez admitted quietly. Then how did I look? Marcus asked. Murphy answered. You looked like someone who might be in trouble with the law. Because I'm black, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. All three officers looked uncomfortable, but they nodded. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I want you to understand something. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years. I've worked harder than most people to get where I am. I've dedicated my life to protecting people and fighting crime. But today, none of that mattered to you. All you saw was my skin color. Garcia wiped his eyes. We know we were wrong. We know we hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, Marcus said. You hurt the justice system. You prevented me from doing my job on an important case. You violated the principles that our courts are supposed to represent. Judge Coleman spoke up. Director Williams, what do you think would be appropriate consequences for these officers? Marcus thought carefully. I think they should keep their jobs, but with conditions. They need extensive training on bias and civil rights. They need to work with community groups to understand the impact of their actions. And they need to become teachers, helping other officers learn from their mistakes. The three officers looked surprised. They had expected to be fired or arrested. You're giving us a second chance? Murphy asked. I'm giving you an opportunity to do better, Marcus said. But if anything like this ever happens again, there won't be a third chance. 6 months later, the courthouse had implemented new training programs for all staff. Officers Rodriguez, Murphy, and Garcia had become advocates for fair treatment and respect. They spoke at police academies and courthouses around the state, sharing their story and teaching others about the dangers of bias and assumptions. The Torino case ended with guilty verdicts on all charges. Vincent Torino was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Marcus's testimony had been crucial to the prosecution's success. Marcus often thought about that day at the courthouse. It had been painful and humiliating, but it had also been educational. He had experienced firsthand what many citizens face when dealing with law enforcement. It made him a better director and a stronger advocate for justice and equality. Lisa Thompson was promoted to assistant court administrator and helped develop new policies to ensure all courthouse visitors were treated with dignity and respect. incident became a case study taught in law schools and police academies across the country. It showed how quickly assumptions and bias could lead to serious injustice, and how important it was for people in authority to treat everyone fairly. Marcus kept a copy of the officer's apology letters in his office. They reminded him that change was possible, but only if people were willing to learn from their mistakes and do better. Helen Carter walked through the front doors of the courthouse at exactly 10:30. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. As FBI Assistant Director, she had worked with Marcus Williams for 8 years. They had solved many difficult cases together, and she respected him more than any other person in law enforcement. Helen was wearing a dark blue suit with her FBI badge clearly visible on her jacket. She carried a briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone who belonged in important places. Several people in the lobby noticed her and stepped aside as she walked past. She went straight to the information desk where Lisa Thompson was working. Lisa looked up and saw the FBI badge immediately. "Good morning, ma'am," Lisa said politely. "How can I help you?" "I'm looking for FBI Director Marcus Williams," Helen said. "He should be here for the Torino case in courtroom 4B. Lisa's eyes went wide. She felt her heart start beating faster. FBI Director Marcus Williams. The name hit her like a shock. She looked across the lobby toward the waiting area, where Marcus was still sitting with the 3 officers standing nearby. "Did you say FBI Director Williams?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes, that's right," Helen said. "Marcus Williams, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Is there a problem?" Lisa stared at Helen, then looked back at Marcus. The man the officers had been treating terribly for over an hour was not just any FBI agent. He was the director of the entire FBI, the most important law enforcement officer in the country. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. Helen noticed Lisa's shocked expression. "What's wrong? Is Director Williams okay?" Lisa pointed toward the waiting area with a trembling finger. "Is that him? The black man sitting on the bench?" Helen turned and looked where Lisa was pointing. She saw Marcus sitting calmly with his briefcase beside him. She also saw officers Rodriguez, Murphy, and Garcia standing near him, talking and laughing among themselves. "Yes, that's Director Williams," Helen said. "Why is he sitting in the public area?" Lisa felt sick to her stomach. The officers. They didn't believe him. He said he was FBI Director, but they thought he was lying. They've been they've been treating him very badly. Helen's face changed completely. Her professional calm disappeared, replaced by cold anger. She had seen discrimination before in her career, but she had never seen anyone treat Marcus Williams with anything but the highest respect. He was one of the most accomplished law enforcement officers in America. "How long has this been going on?" Helen asked in a dangerous voice. "Over an hour," Lisa said. "They took his phone. They wouldn't let him go to the federal courtroom. They kept making jokes about him." Helen looked across the lobby again. As she watched, Officer Rodriguez said something to Marcus that made Murphy and Garcia laugh loudly. Marcus remained calm, but Helen could see the tension in his shoulders. Helen walked across the lobby with long, angry steps. Her heels clicked loudly on the marble floor. Several people noticed her approaching and could tell she was furious. "Excuse me, officers," Helen said in a clear, commanding voice. All 3 officers turned around. They saw a well-dressed white woman with an FBI badge and immediately changed their attitude. "Yes, ma'am," Rodriguez said respectfully. "How can we help you?" "You can start by explaining why you're harassing FBI Director Marcus Williams," Helen said coldly. The 3 officers froze. Rodriguez's mouth fell open. Murphy took a step backward. Garcia looked like he had been hit by lightning. "FBI Director?" Rodriguez stammered. But that's impossible, is it? Helen said. She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo from the FBI website. It was an official picture of Marcus in his FBI director uniform. This is Director Marcus Williams, the man you've been mistreating. For the past hour. Murphy shook his head in disbelief. No, that can't be right. He's just ... He said he was FBI, but we thought ... You thought what? Helen demanded. You thought a black man couldn't be the FBI director? Garcia tried to speak. We didn't know ... He looked like... We see a lot of people here. He showed you his credentials, Helen said. He told you exactly who he was. But you decided not to believe him because of how he looks. Marcus stood up slowly. He had been watching this conversation with interest. After more than an hour of being treated like a criminal, it felt strange to see the officers' attitudes change so completely. Helen, Marcus said calmly, thank you for coming. Helen turned to him, and her angry expression softened. Marcus, I am so sorry. When you didn't show up for the trial, I got worried. I've been trying to get into the courtroom, Marcus said, but these officers had other ideas. Rodriguez was holding Marcus's phone in his shaking hands. He looked at it like it was about to explode. Sir ... Director Williams ... I ... You took his phone? Helen said, her voice getting louder. You confiscated the FBI director's phone? We? Thought ... We were worried about security ... Murphy tried to explain. Security? Helen repeated. You were worried about the FBI director being a security threat? People all around the lobby had stopped what they were doing to watch this scene. Lawyers, court workers, and visitors were all staring at the three officers, who looked like they wanted to disappear. Lisa Thompson walked over from the information desk. She felt guilty for not speaking up earlier when she suspected something was wrong. Director Williams, she said quietly, I'm Lisa Thompson, court clerk. I'm very sorry about what happened. I should have said something sooner. Marcus smiled at her kindly. Thank you, Miss Thompson. I appreciate your concern. Tony, Garcia, the bailiff, was sweating heavily. Director Williams, sir, I need to inform Judge Coleman about this situation. Yes, you do, Helen said sharply. Judge Coleman needs to know that her courthouse officers spent an hour humiliating the FBI director. Rodriguez finally handed Marcus's phone back to him. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Sir, we made a mistake. A big mistake. Marcus took his phone and put it back in his pocket. Yes, you did make a mistake. The question is what we're going to do about it. Murphy looked terrified. Are we going to be arrested? Are we going to lose our jobs? Marcus looked at the three officers for a long moment. They had treated him terribly, but he could see they were scared and ashamed. He thought about what kind of response would actually help prevent this from happening to other people in the future. We need to have a serious conversation, Marcus said, all of us, including Judge Coleman and the courthouse supervisor. Helen was still angry. Marcus, these officers violated your civil rights. They harassed a federal official. There should be serious consequences. There will be consequences, Marcus said calmly. But the most important thing is making sure this never happens again to anyone else. Around the lobby, people were whispering to each other. The news was spreading quickly that the man the officers had been mistreating was actually the FBI director. Some people looked shocked. Others looked angry about what they had witnessed. Rodriguez, Murphy, and Garcia stood together, looking miserable. They knew their careers were probably over. They had made the worst mistake possible, and there was no way to take it back. Marcus looked at his watch. The trial had been going on for over an hour without him. Helen, we need to get to courtroom. 4B Amanda is probably struggling with the technical evidence. Of course, Helen said. Judge Coleman will want to see you immediately. As they walked toward the federal courtrooms, Marcus thought about everything that had happened. It had been a terrible experience, but it had also been educational. He now understood in a very personal way what many citizens faced when dealing with law enforcement officers who made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. The three officers watched them walk away, knowing that their world had just changed forever. Inside courtroom 4B, the trial was beginning. Judge William Hayes sat behind his large wooden desk, wearing his black robe. The courtroom was full of people. FBI agents sat in the front rows. Newspaper reporters held their notebooks ready. Family. Members of victims sat quietly, hoping for justice. Amanda Foster stood up at the prosecutor's table. She was 35 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a dark gray suit and looked very serious. This was the biggest case of her career. Your Honor, Amanda said, the United States government is here today to present evidence against the Torino crime family. For 20 years, this organization has terrorized our city with violence, drugs, and corruption. She walked toward the jury box. 12 ordinary citizens sat there, ready to listen to the evidence. Amanda had practiced this speech many times, but she felt nervous. She kept looking toward the back of the courtroom, expecting to see Marcus Williams. He was supposed to be there to help her understand the complex evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, of the jury, Amanda continued, we will show you bank records, phone recordings, and witness testimony that proves Vincent Torino and his associates are guilty of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. At the defense table sat Vincent Torino and his lawyer, Richard Blake. Torino was a heavy man, with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore an expensive suit and showed no emotion as Amanda spoke. Richard Blake was known as one of the best criminal defense lawyers in the state. He was tall and thin with silver hair and a confident smile. Blake whispered something to Torino, who nodded slightly. Blake had defended many criminals over the years, and he knew how to find weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Amanda opened her folder and pulled out the first piece of evidence. This bank statement shows that Mr. Torino deposited $2 million in cash over 6 months. He claims this money came from his restaurant business, but we will prove that it came from illegal activities. Outside in the courthouse lobby, Marcus still sat on the hard bench. He checked his phone and saw 3 missed calls from his assistant at FBI headquarters. There were also text messages from other FBI agents asking about the trial. Marcus typed, "A quick response. Delayed at courthouse. Will update soon." Officer Rodriguez walked over to him. "What are you doing with that phone?" "I'm checking messages," Marcus said. "Messages from who? Your drug dealer friends?" Rodriguez asked with a mean smile. Marcus looked up at him. "I'm checking work messages." "Work messages? What kind of work?" "Do you do? And don't say FBI again." Before Marcus could answer, Rodriguez grabbed the phone from his hands. "Let me see what kind of messages you're getting." "Hey, you can't take my phone," Marcus said, standing up. "I can do whatever I want," Rodriguez said. "This is a federal courthouse. We have security concerns." Murphy and Garcia walked over when they heard the commotion. "What's going on?" Murphy asked. "Our friend here was texting someone," Rodriguez sighed, holding up Marcus's phone. "Could be planning something." Garcia nodded seriously. "We need to be careful. Lot of important cases going on today." Marcus felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "Those are work messages from my colleagues. You have no right to take my phone." "Your colleagues?" Murphy laughed. "You mean your fellow criminals?" "Lisa." Thompson was walking past with more court documents when she heard this conversation. She stopped and pretended to organize her papers while listening. The whole situation made her feel uncomfortable. She had never seen the officers treat anyone this badly before. Rodriguez was trying to unlock Marcus's phone, but it was password protected. "What's your password?" he demanded. "I'm not giving you my password," Marcus said firmly. "Then maybe you're hiding something," Garcia said. "Maybe we should call the police and have you arrested." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Arrested for what?" "Suspicious behavior," Rodriguez said. "Lying to federal officers. Carrying a fake ID. Should I continue?" Lisa Thompson couldn't stay quiet anymore. She walked over to the group. "Excuse me, officers. Is there a problem here?" "Nothing you need to worry about, Lisa," Murphy said. "Just dealing with a troublemaker." Lisa looked at Marcus. Up close, she could see that his suit was very expensive. His shoes were polished and looked new. His briefcase had a real leather smell. Everything about him suggested he was successful and professional. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked Marcus. "I'm fine, thank you," Marcus said politely. "I just need to get to courtroom 4B for the federal case." "The federal case?" Lisa said. "Are you a lawyer?" Before Marcus could answer, Rodriguez stepped between them. "Lisa, I told you not to worry about this. This man is not who he says he is. But if he needs to be in the federal courtroom—" Lisa started to say, "He doesn't," Garcia interrupted. "Trust me, we know what we're doing." Lisa looked uncertain, but she didn't argue with the officers. She walked away, but she kept looking back at Marcus with a worried expression. Back in courtroom 4B, Amanda was presenting more evidence. She showed the jury photographs of crime scenes where Torino's men had hurt people. She played recordings of phone calls where Torino discussed illegal activities. This recording was made by an FBI wiretap. Amanda explained to the jury, "You can hear Vincent Torino telling his associate to take care of a witness who is going to testify against them." The jury listened carefully as Torino's voice filled the courtroom. "That guy is becoming a problem. Make sure he understands to keep his mouth shut permanently." Richard Blake stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution has now proven that this recording is authentic." Judge Hayes looked at Amanda. "Miss Foster, do you have proper authentication for this evidence?" Amanda felt nervous. This was exactly the kind of technical issue that Marcus Williams could help her with. He understood how FBI wiretaps worked and could explain the authentication process to the jury. "Your Honor, I have documentation from the FBI technical team," Amanda said, but she sounded less confident than before. Blake smiled. He could sense weakness. "Your Honor, I request that this evidence be excluded until the prosecution can provide proper technical testimony about how this recording was obtained and verified." Judge Hayes nodded. "Ms. Foster, you'll need to bring in an FBI technical expert to authenticate this recording before I allow it into evidence." Amanda felt frustrated. She had planned to rely on Marcus's expertise to handle these technical questions. Without him, she was struggling to present the evidence properly. Meanwhile, in the lobby, Marcus was still arguing with the three officers about his phone. More people were watching now, including several lawyers who looked uncomfortable with the situation. "Look," Marcus said to Rodriguez, "I need to be in that courtroom. People are depending on me. People are depending on you?" Murphy said mockingly. "What people? Your family? Your lawyer?" "My colleagues," Marcus said. "The people I work with." Garcia laughed. "Your colleagues at the McDonald's drive-thru?" The cruel comment made several people nearby look shocked. An elderly woman sitting on another bench shook her head in disgust. A young lawyer whispered to his colleague, "This isn't right." Marcus felt humiliated, but he also felt something else. He was learning important lessons about how the justice system treated people who didn't look like those in power. As FBI director, he had read reports about these problems, but experiencing it himself was teaching him things that no report could capture. He looked at the three officers who were supposed to protect and serve the public. Instead, they were abusing their authority and treating him like a criminal based on nothing more than assumptions and prejudice. Rodriguez was still holding Marcus's phone. "You know what? I think we should keep this phone as evidence." "Evidence of what?" Marcus asked. "Evidence that you're up to something suspicious," Rodriguez said with a satisfied smile. Marcus realized that this situation was getting worse, not better. He wondered how much longer he would have to endure this treatment before someone in authority realized what was happening. Marcus sat on the hard wooden bench and watched people walk past him. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried by with thick folders. Families whispered to each other nervously. Court workers moved around with purpose. Everyone seemed to know where they belonged except him. He checked his watch again. 10 minutes until the trial started. He needed to get into courtroom 4B soon. The federal prosecutor, Amanda Foster, would be looking for him. His team had spent 2 years building this case against the Torino crime family. Today was the day all their hard work would pay off. Marcus stood up and walked toward the hallway that led to the federal courtrooms. He had studied the courthouse map online before coming. Courtroom 4B was down the hall and to the right. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Officer Murphy called out. Marcus turned around. Both officers were walking toward him quickly. Rodriguez looked angry. "I told you to wait in the public area," Rodriguez said. "The federal courtrooms are not for people like you." "I explained that I need to be in courtroom 4B," Marcus said patiently. "I have official business there." Murphy stepped in front of Marcus, blocking his path. Murphy was taller than Marcus and used his height to look down at him. "Listen carefully. Public defendants wait outside until they are called. You don't get to wander around the courthouse." "I'm not a defendant," Marcus said again. "I work for the FBI." "Right, and I'm Superman," Rodriguez said with a nasty laugh. "You know what your problem is? You think you're better than everyone else. You put on a nice suit and think people will believe your lies." More people were starting to notice the commotion. A group of lawyers stopped talking and looked over at them. Marcus felt embarrassed, but kept his voice calm. "I'm not lying. You can verify my identity with one phone call." "We're not making any phone calls for you," Murphy said. "Now go back to your seat and wait quietly." A third officer walked over to join them. This was Tony Garcia, the bailiff for Judge Patricia Coleman's courtroom. Garcia was an older man with gray hair and a stern face. He had worked at the courthouse for 20 years. "What's the problem here?" Garcia asked. "This guy thinks he's FBI," Rodriguez explained. "Says he's supposed to be in the federal courtroom. Can you believe it?" Garcia looked at Marcus from head to toe. He saw a black man in a decent suit, but nothing that impressed him. "Is that right? You're FBI?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "I'm here to observe the Torino case." All three officers started laughing. Garcia shook his head. "The Torino case? That's a big federal case. Very important people are working on that. You really think they'd let someone like you in there?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Someone like you. He had heard those words before, many times in his life. When he was young and trying to join the police force. When he was working his way up through the FBI. When he was nominated to be director. There were always people who looked at his skin color and decided what he could and could not do. "I understand this seems unusual," Marcus said carefully. "But I really do work for the FBI. I'm supposed to be in that courtroom right now." "Stop lying," Murphy said loudly. "It's embarrassing. You're making a fool of yourself." Several court workers had gathered nearby, pretending to be busy but clearly listening to the conversation. Lisa Thompson was among them. She was holding a stack of files and trying to look like she was reading them, but she kept glancing at Marcus. Something about Marcus bothered her. Not in a bad way, but in a puzzling way. Most defendants who came to court looked nervous or scared or angry. Marcus looked calm and confident. He spoke clearly and politely, even when the officers were being rude to him. His clothes were nice, but not flashy. His briefcase looked expensive. Everything about him seemed professional. "You know what I think?" Rodriguez said, getting closer to Marcus. "I think you're here for a criminal case. Probably drugs or theft. And you're trying to sneak into the federal courtroom to see how the big cases work. Maybe you think you can learn something." "That's not true," Marcus said. "Or maybe," Garcia added, "you're planning something. Maybe you want to cause trouble in the federal courtroom. We see all kinds of crazy people here." Marcus felt a flash of anger, but controlled it. "I am not planning anything. I am not a criminal. I am a federal law enforcement officer." "Federal law enforcement," Murphy repeated loudly. "Did you hear that, guys? We got ourselves a federal agent. What's your badge number?" Rodriguez demanded. Marcus reached into his jacket. All three officers tensed up, as if they expected him to pull out a weapon. Instead, he pulled out his FBI credentials again. Rodriguez grabbed the credentials and looked at them closely. "These look fake to me." "The FBI director? Really? You expect us to believe that?" "The FBI director is probably some old white guy sitting in Washington," Garcia said. "Not someone like you hanging around a courthouse." Lisa Thompson heard this comment and frowned. She knew it wasn't right to make assumptions about people based on how they looked. Her own father had faced similar treatment when he was younger. But she also knew that the three officers had more authority than she did. She didn't know what to say. "I've been the FBI director for 3 years," Marcus said quietly. "Before that, I was associate deputy director. Before that, assistant director of the Criminal Investigative Division. I've worked for the FBI for 22 years. "Wow, you really studied for this lie," Murphy said. "Too bad we're not buying it." A young woman in a business suit walked past them. She was Amanda Foster, the federal prosecutor. She looked around the lobby as if she was searching for someone. Her eyes passed over Marcus, but didn't stop. She looked worried. Marcus saw her and knew she was looking for him. "Excuse me, Miss Foster," he called out. Amanda turned around and looked at him. She seemed confused. Marcus was about to explain who he was when Officer Rodriguez stepped between them. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," Rodriguez said to Amanda. "This man is bothering people. We're handling the situation." Amanda looked uncertain. She glanced at Marcus again, then at the three officers. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Garcia said. "This gentleman was just going back to his seat to wait for his case to be called." Amanda nodded and walked away quickly. She disappeared down the hallway toward the federal courtrooms. Marcus watched her go. He felt frustrated and helpless. The prosecutor who needed his expertise was looking for him, but these officers were preventing him from doing his job. "See," Murphy said, "even she doesn't know who you are. If you were really the FBI director, don't you think the federal prosecutor would recognize you?" Marcus didn't answer. The truth was that he and Amanda had only communicated by phone and email. They had never met in person. She had no reason to recognize him, especially not in this situation. "Now," Rodriguez said, pointing back toward the waiting area, "go sit down and stay there. And if you cause any more trouble, we'll have you removed from the building." Marcus looked at all three officers. They stood with their arms crossed, waiting for him to obey. Around them, other people watched the scene with curiosity and discomfort. Marcus walked back to the bench and sat down. He pulled out his phone to check the time. The trial had already started. He was missing the opening statements that his team had worked so hard to prepare. As he sat there, Marcus thought about all the reports he had read about citizens being mistreated by law enforcement. He had always taken these reports seriously, but experiencing it himself was different. It was humiliating and frustrating in ways he hadn't fully understood before. The three officers stood near the metal detector, occasionally looking over at him and whispering to each other. Marcus could guess what they were saying. He sat quietly and waited, wondering how long this situation would continue. Marcus Williams stepped out of his black sedan and looked up at the tall courthouse building. The morning sun made the glass windows shine bright. He was 48 years old, with short gray hair and kind brown eyes. He wore a simple dark blue suit and carried a small briefcase. Marcus had been to many courthouses in his career, but today felt different. He was here to watch an important case about a crime family that had been causing trouble for years. His team at the FBI had worked very hard to catch these criminals. Today, the trial would begin. Usually, Marcus would enter through the special entrance for federal workers. But there was a problem with his security pass today. The computer system was down, and he could not get through the federal entrance. He looked at his watch. The trial would start in 30 minutes. He decided to go through the main entrance like everyone else. The courthouse was busy. People walked up and down the steps. Some were lawyers in expensive suits. Others were regular people who looked worried or scared. Marcus walked toward the main doors, feeling calm and ready. Inside the courthouse, 2 security officers stood near the metal detector. Officer Danny Rodriguez was a short man with a thick mustache. He had worked at the courthouse for 15 years. Officer Kevin Murphy was taller and younger, with red hair and pale skin. He had been working there for 8 years. Both officers watched as people walked through security. They checked bags and made sure no one brought weapons into the building. It was an important job, and they took it seriously. When Marcus walked through the front doors, Officer Rodriguez looked at him carefully. He saw a black man in a suit, but something about Marcus made Rodriguez feel suspicious. Rodriguez whispered to Murphy, "Look at this guy. Bet he's here for court." Murphy looked at Marcus and nodded. "Yeah, probably another defendant trying to look important." Marcus walked toward the metal detector. He put his briefcase on the belt and stepped through the machine. It beeped once, and he took his briefcase from the other side. He moved toward the information desk to ask about the federal courtroom. "Excuse me, sir," Officer Rodriguez called out. "Can you step over here?" Marcus turned around and walked back to the officers. He smiled politely. "Yes, officer. How can I help you?" "We need to see some identification," Rodriguez said. His tone was not friendly. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He showed Rodriguez his driver's license. Rodriguez looked at it for a long time, then handed it to Murphy. "Marcus Williams," Murphy read out loud. "What are you here for today, Marcus?" "I'm here on official business," Marcus said calmly. "I need to observe a federal case in courtroom 4B. Rodriguez laughed. "Official business? What kind of official business?" Marcus pulled out his FBI identification card. "I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm here to observe the Torino family case." Both officers looked at the ID card. Rodriguez held it up to the light, as if checking if it was real. Murphy shook his head. "Nice try, buddy," Murphy said, "but we see fake IDs all the time." "You can't fool us." Marcus felt surprised. "I assure you, officer, my identification is real. You can call the FBI office to verify." "Sure we can," Rodriguez said with a smirk. "And I suppose you're the FBI director too?" "Actually," Marcus said quietly, "I am." Both officers burst out laughing. Other people in the courthouse lobby turned to look at them. Marcus felt his face get warm but he stayed calm. "Oh, this is good," Murphy said, wiping tears from his eyes. "The FBI director. And I'm the President of the United States." "Listen, pal," Rodriguez said, stepping closer to Marcus. "We don't appreciate people lying to us. Now, are you a defendant in a case today, or are you here for someone else?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm not a defendant. I'm here to observe. A federal case. I really do work for the FBI." "Right," Murphy said. "And what's your rank? Are you a special agent? A supervisor?" "I'm the director of the FBI," Marcus said again. This made the officers laugh even harder. Rodriguez slapped Murphy on the back. "Did you hear that, Kevin? We got the big boss himself here." A woman walked past them carrying a stack of papers. She was Lisa Thompson, a court clerk who had worked there for 10 years. She heard the officers laughing and saw Marcus standing there looking uncomfortable. Something about the situation made her feel uneasy, but she kept walking. "Look, Marcus," Rodriguez said, reading the name from the ID again. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit in the public waiting area like everyone else. When your case is called, you can go in. Until then, you wait quietly." "But I'm not a defendant," Marcus said. "I need to be in the federal courtroom." "Federal courtroom?" Murphy laughed. "You mean the courtroom for important people?" "Sorry, Marcus, but that's not for people like you." Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. He had experienced this kind of treatment before, many years ago when he was younger. But he had thought things were different now. He had worked hard his whole life to reach his position. He had dedicated his career to protecting people and fighting crime. Now, 2 officers were treating him like a criminal just because of how he looked. "I understand you're doing your job," Marcus said carefully, "but I really do need to get to courtroom 4B. The federal prosecutor is expecting me." "The federal prosecutor?" Rodriguez said. "What would a federal prosecutor want with you?" Marcus decided to try a different approach. "You can call the FBI office. Ask to speak with Assistant Director Helen Carter. She will confirm who I am." Murphy crossed his arms. "We're not calling anyone. You're going to sit down and wait like everyone else." Marcus looked around the lobby. More people were staring at them now. He felt embarrassed and frustrated, but he also felt something else. He was curious about how far this would go. As the FBI director, he often heard reports about how regular citizens were treated by law enforcement. Now he was experiencing it himself. "Okay," Marcus said. "I'll wait. In the public area." "Good choice," Rodriguez said. "And Marcus, don't try any funny business. We'll be watching you." Marcus walked to the wooden benches in the waiting area. He sat down and placed his briefcase beside him. He looked at his watch again. The trial would start in 15 minutes, and he was supposed to be inside the courtroom. But for now, he would wait and see what happened next.